Hi everyone, and welcome to the tutorial of how to write a killer body paragraph. So the first thing that you guys want to do is you want to make sure you have a solid thesis statement. This is the one sentence that you're arguing throughout your entire essay. So for example, I'm going to use one of my former students, Sophie. I'm going to use one of her old essays on the house on Mango Street. And here is her thesis statement. Stereotypes play a big role in Sandra Cisneros' house on Mango Street, as exemplified through discrimination against lower class, the economic value of a certain race, and the role of women in the community. So this is a very strong thesis statement. Here is what she's actually arguing, that yes, stereotypes do play a big role in the house on Mango Street, and she shows us what our three avenues are going to be. So stereotyping plays a big role through the discrimination against lower class, through the economic value of a certain race, and through the role of women in society. So again, we have our main argument and our three avenues, which are going to turn into three different body paragraphs. So let's flesh out one of these avenues into a body paragraph. And the first thing we're going to want to do with starting a body paragraph is start off with our topic sentence, which is kind of like a thesis, but only for this one paragraph. So it previews what the entire paragraph will be about. In this case, we're going to write a paragraph about avenue number 1, discrimination against lower class. So let's start this body paragraph with a topic sentence. This is a good topic sentence. A frequent stereotype for lower class people is that they are untrustworthy criminals, and readers can see the stereotype through the house on Mango Street. So we're connecting this topic sentence to the thesis statement, okay, for organization purposes, and then we're also saying how this particular avenue relates back to our argument, or our thesis statement that stereotypes are seen throughout the house on Mango Street. Now we want to prove this. How are we going to prove that stereotypes for lower class people is one of the many stereotypes that we see in the house on Mango Street? How can we prove that to our reader? We're going to prove it to our reader through textual evidence. So in preparation of integrating textual evidence, we need to remember ICE. And ICE stands for Introducing Textual Evidence, Citing Your Textual Evidence, and Explaining Your Textual Evidence. So in this case, the actual evidence itself, the quote itself, becomes the meat to the two sandwich pieces. So this is like one big sandwich, bread, meat, bread. So let's flesh this out here. For introducing evidence, you're going to be explaining to your reader who's talking, who are they talking to, and what's kind of going on in the text when this particular quotation is said. So for example, I'm going to introduce a piece of textual evidence. Okay, so here is the introduction to our textual evidence. In one of the vignettes, Esperanza informs readers of the common behavior of high-class, presumably white people that unintentionally venture into her neighborhood. With this introduction, we know who's talking, Esperanza, who she's talking to, the readers, and what she's talking about. She's talking about how when high-class people, usually white people, come into her neighborhood, what they think or how they act when they come into this lower class neighborhood. We put a colon to introduce the quote, and then we move on to citing the actual textual evidence. So we'll change colors. And now you give the actual quote. Now, when we use MLA citation in text, we end the quote with a quotation mark, and in parentheses we put the last name of the author and the page number that the quotation was found on, followed by punctuation at the very end. So now we have topic sentence, introduction to our first piece of textual evidence, our textual evidence correctly cited, and now we have to explain our textual evidence. And this is the hardest part for a lot of people. In other words, you're in simplified terms and in your own words explaining what that quote means, and then you're connecting that quote to your thesis statement. How does this particular quote prove what you're trying to say in your thesis statement? So we'll start with the first part, getting the quotation into your own words and simplifying it and re-explaining it to your reader. So let's see, if I were to explain this quote to a friend, tell them what it means in plain English, this is what I would say. So here's the first part of my explanation. Again, I'm taking the quotation and I'm putting it into my own words and simplifying it for my reader. Higher class individuals mistakenly travel through Esperanza's neighborhood, and based on the look and reputation of it, they make stereotypical assumptions about the people living there. They believe all those who live in the neighborhood are dangerous and ill-intentioned. Now, for the second part of my explanation of my textual evidence, I'm going to connect that quote to my ultimate argument. So again, I'm connecting to my thesis statement. Esperanza's words exemplify the type of racism based on social and economic status that she and other characters encounter in the house on Mango Street. Now for the last part of this body paragraph would be the second piece of textual evidence. Okay, I'm not going to go over ice again with another quotation, but I will show you the transition sentence that needs to be written between two different pieces of textual evidence. So this is known as a transition sentence. It has a transitional word or phrase that helps the reader and the writer go from one idea to the next idea. So we're going to have a second piece of textual evidence using the character Louis and when he steals the Cadillac, and how that can also be considered, socioeconomic racism. But we're not going to put that here. But the important part that I want you to see is that I'm saying, in addition, we can see social and economic racism occur in the incident with Louis and the stolen Cadillac. I'm using in addition as a transitional phrase to go from one piece of textual evidence to the next. And then finally, after we repeat the ICE process for the second piece of textual evidence, we want to come up with a closing or concluding sentence, one that will either wrap up the paragraph or help to introduce the next. So a good concluding sentence might be, throughout the house on Mango Street, people's worth isn't only dependent on the amount of money they have, but the color of their skin. This is a wonderful concluding sentence because it transitions into the next body paragraph, which is going to be about racism. Okay, I hope this tutorial helped you a little bit. To recap, you always want to have your thesis statement at the top, so you can always remind yourself that anything that you're talking about should help support your thesis statement. Body paragraph should start with a topic sentence, which previews the rest of the paragraph. Then we go into introducing a quote with context, who's speaking, who are they speaking to, and what's going on in the text during that time. The actual quotation with MLA citation, last name of the author, and page number. And an explanation of the quote, which is putting the quote into your own words and then connecting it back to your thesis statement. A transition, when you're going from one piece of evidence to the next, and ending with a concluding sentence that either wraps up the paragraph you just wrote or helps transition into the next paragraph you will write.